Master of Names, Chapter 1, Part 3. All characters and events in this reading, other than those clearly in the public domain, are fictitious, and any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Plum opened the door and let himself in. His mother looked up at him with a wry smile, the warm fireplace crackling over in the corner. She looked out towards the shed. "I see smoke. Good. You have done well. The delegate will be arriving here soon, and you'd better get cleaned up," she said. Plum nodded and went upstairs. After a quick wash, and now wearing a fresh set of clothes, he sat back down at the table. He watched his mother getting everything ready. "Why has this person chosen our place over somewhere else, like the Brown Pig Inn?" Plum asked. "Because," she replied with a sigh, "the rooms there aren't big enough. I have already heard some quite colourful complaints from Damien Fryer when he heard the news." She giggled and smiled ruefully. "The delegate will be arriving here at exactly 10 p.m. So when it's almost 9:30 p.m, I want you to stand out with a lantern in case their carriage comes early. Now I will go and finish preparing our dinner. We're going to have a long night ahead of us." Understanding, and with no more questions to ask, Plum helped with the cooking preparations. Together they washed and cut up the vegetables for the stew and the other cooking accoutrements. They looked sideways at each other and began to hum a delightful tune that filled the kitchen. At last, after giving the stew a final stir, they were finished. "Right," Adriana said with satisfaction. "That should do it." She took the stew over to the table along with the potatoes and vegetables and quickly set the table. Reaching for 2 candles, she placed them into the well-used candlestick holders and swiftly lit them. She put down a jug of cold water and 2 plates, knives and forks. Then Adriana sat down opposite Plum and they started to eat. "How was your day?" she asked between bites. "Well, after delivering the grain, I spent the whole day cleaning the old shed, remember? It was a nightmare. The place was so dusty. It was terrible. I had to mop, clean, and scrub every inch of that place. I don't know why state officials would want to come and stay at our place. We're not even a licensed inn." "Yes," Adriana agreed. "It's a mystery to me. I don't understand it at all. I mean, I know they want more room, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. In any case, we need to welcome this man as if he were part of our own family. Oh, it's getting close to 9:30, Sport." She grabbed the lantern that was at the end of the table, lit the wick, and handed it to Plum. "Go and wait outside for the visitor. When he arrives, bring him in here so we can discuss how many nights he plans to stay. Come on, let's go. We don't want to keep our guest waiting. And don't forget to rug up. Hats on the stand." Plum stood outside with the lantern, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the unknown guest. The air was moist and cool. It was interminable standing out there for what just seemed like hours and hours. But then, finally, Plum could see a horse and carriage in the distance, heading towards the house. disappeared from view for a moment and then charged up the hill with increasing speed. The horses snorted and lunged wildly as they came closer and halted abruptly right in front of Plum. With the driver trying to calm the horses down, the door of the carriage swung open and out stepped an envoy. He stood looking at the boy for a moment. Then, unfurling his scroll, he announced, "I now present His Royal Highness, Prince Drake of Law, the Prince of Shine and heir to the White Throne." Plum could hardly speak. He was overcome with a mixture of excitement, shock, bewilderment, and confusion. The man who was stepping down from the carriage wasn't dressed in the royal robes of the prince, but more like that of a ranger. His attire consisted of leather pants and a hooded cape, and by the light of the carriage's lamp, Plum noticed the emblem of shine on his leather tunic, indicating his rank as royalty. The prince came closer and stood looking at the boy. He had shoulder-length black hair and a beard. His soft blue eyes shone in the light from Plum's lantern. Plum could see a long scar across the man's eye. The man had the hard look of an experienced warrior. The man smiled at him and said, "Prince Drake, at your service and your family's. And you must be Plum." "Yes, but how did you know my name?" Plum said with a nervous stutter. "Oh, we have a very long list in the royal archives, telling us the exact number of people that live in the kingdom, their names, and their ages." Plum's eyes widened. "And you memorized all of them?" "Not you. This is the prince," the envoy interjected. "You must address him as your highness, not as an equal." Just as Plum was about to give a sharp retort, the prince turned towards the envoy. "Shut up," he said. "This family has invited me into their home, and I am sick of all the royal titles and fanfare. Now I have booked a room for you at the Brown Pig Inn. I suggest you go and see Damien Fryer at once. I will call for you again when you are needed." The envoy looked meekly at him. "Oh, very well, Your Excellency." "Very well," he replied submissively, climbing into the front of the carriage. The driver flicked the reins and the carriage disappeared over the hill and headed towards the town centre. "Sorry about that, my friend," Prince Drake said reassuringly. "There are many like that in court, driven by official protocol and rules, setting themselves in a class above others. I have a strong disdain for people like that." Drake smiled and searched Plum's face. "You cannot find good help these days. Come on, boy, let's go inside." Approaching the door, Plum knocked 3 times, mainly to give Adriana some warning. Adriana opened the door with a smile. "Come on in, weary travellers," she said, and directed them into the living room, where they all sat down. Was it a long journey from Shine? She asked. Drake replied, Yes, very long. It is about 28 days' ride from Shine to Devane. We did not stop, except for food and to rest the horses. Horses? She said in amazement. That is a long ride. Plum interjected. He is not really a delegate. He is the Prince of Shine. His mother nearly fell back in her chair, then quickly corrected herself. Your Highness. Oh, just call me Drake. I hate those royal titles. I much prefer being just one of the common men. Acknowledging Drake's wishes, and with a small nod of her head, she composed herself. All right then, we need to discuss how many nights you're going to stay. So what is it going to be? She asked smoothly, as if he were any other traveller. To tell you the truth, Drake said, scratching his moustache, I don't exactly know how long I'll be here. I will stay as long as it takes to do the census. Adriana looked at him. If you'll excuse me for saying so, there are a lot of boys in Devane, particularly around Plum's age. It would take many months to try and work out which one of them has magical abilities. Drake waved his hand dismissively. It doesn't actually take that long. What will take time are the preparations and the gathering. And in the final stage, the sacred wand decides. The arcane census will gather all the boys together in the town hall in 3 days' time. Following all of the tasks, the final test is when I will point my wand at them. If it reveals the aura, I know that they have abilities to be nurtured. So, that's how it works, thought Plum. It was all a bit strange to him. Preparations, gatherings, wands, auras. So why do you have to do this task? He asked Drake. Because the delegate who was planning to come here fell ill, and I needed to get out of Shine. So I asked my father if I could do it. He objected at first, saying it was not something that the Prince of Law should be doing. But I insisted. My father knows that I am no child, and he knows how determined I am, so he finally consented. And now, he spread his hands out in front of him. Here I am. He smiled. It beats sitting on the throne, listening to advisors, waging war and keeping up with the affairs of Shine City. Drake continued. Adriana, I will pay you for as long as I need the room. Would that be agreeable to you? Yes, of course, she said, for as long as you need. They all stood up. Adriana handed the lantern to Plum. Take the lantern and walk our guest to his cabin. He must be tired. Plum was tired too, but with a stifled groan, he took the lantern and headed out the door. Drake paused. Just one question, Adriana, Drake said with a look of interest on his face. Why did you call your child Plum? Adriana giggled. Because he was as purple as one when I gave birth to him. Drake started to laugh, but Plum was not amused. He had always hated his name, thinking it to be an incredibly odd name to give a child. Drake followed Plum out the door, and as they followed down the path to the cabin door, Drake said, You have a good mother. Yeah, she's the best. She's the only family I have." Before the door closed, Drake said, "Get some sleep, Plum." Plum nodded. But before he left, he said, "Breakfast starts at 7 o'clock sharp. Please be prompt. Oh, and here is the key to the shed. You'll need it." With a nod, Drake said, "Thank you." Plum walked back to the house, thinking that their royal guest felt a lot like the big brother he never had. He came towards the house and, pausing on the front porch, looked out towards Devane. In the light of the bright moon, the miles of surrounding wheat fields were shifting and moving in the breeze, making a gentle shushing sound. He brooded over the census. It was only a few days away, and he wondered who would be picked, or if he would be picked. What would happen if he was the only magic user in Devane? He had a queasy feeling of suspense rolling inside, but his good judgment told him that there was nothing to worry about. He shivered and went inside the house with a reassured heart and shut the door behind him. The next morning, Plum got up and went out to the breakfast table. His mother was waiting for him. She smiled. "Breakfast?" she said. He sat down, and there was already bacon, eggs, sausages, and tomato on the table. He started to eat a bit of sausage, and then he asked with his mouth full of food, Where is our guest?" Adriana said, "Oh, Prince Drake? He left early this morning to set up for the census in the town hall. It's in 2 days' time. Come on, finish your breakfast, and then you can go out and help Damien Fryer with the store. See if he has any work for you today." On the off days, when Plum wasn't delivering grain or helping his mother, he would help Damien Fryer out in the store with the stock. He would put labels on things, or even help out behind the desk, taking orders and selling items. He did whatever task was directed to do. He got paid for it, of course, but less than when he delivered the grain. The grain was much more important to Damien than having an extra helping hand in the store. When Plum arrived at the town centre and went into the Brown Pig Inn, Damien Fryer began. "Ah, good, you're here. Well, there's lots of work to be done. You might as well start by bringing up some new barrels from the cellar, and after that, I want you to start cleaning the upstairs toilets and the bedrooms." Plum protested. "But that's 7 bedrooms and washrooms. That would take me all day. Can't one of your daughters, Kathy or Kim, help you out?" "They are both busy in the back with cooking duties, preparing lunch for our guests," he snapped. "Now get to it. There are a lot of boys in Devane, and I can easily find a replacement." With that, Plum took off like a shot, heaving the barrels up from the cellar. Then he ran upstairs to begin furiously cleaning the bathrooms and bedrooms. Meanwhile, Drake walked into the store. "What's all the commotion?" Drake asked. Damien looked at him. "Oh, nothing, Your Highness. It's difficult to find good help. I'm just dealing with one of my employees," he said with as much a sickly sweetness as he could muster. Drake gave him a skeptical look. "Yes, I hope you don't treat your employees like this every day. Otherwise, I might have to put in a report to the government of Shine about your lack of care with your staff and your foul temper. Be careful, or you will earn yourself a one-way ticket to the streets again." There are willing replacements for your position at the Brown Pig Inn waiting at the wings. Damien looked like he had just been hit by a physical blow. While recovering, he gave a courtly bow and said with a forced smile, "Your humble servant." Then he called out, "Boy!" He didn't receive a reply for a few minutes. Then he called out, "Plum!" louder this time. Hearing a "yes" from upstairs, Damien called back, "Well, that's enough for today. Come downstairs and I'll give you your money." Plum looked downstairs and he saw the two men standing in the dining area. He came downstairs with his mop and bucket and placed them beside Damien. With some reluctance, Damien got out his large sack of coins and handed it to Plum. Plum was wide-eyed with shock. He had never been paid this much before. "It's 2 days to the census, boy. Go out, relax, and enjoy your 4 days from rest. There will be plenty of work waiting for you when you get back," Damien said with a forced grin. After Plum left with Drake, Damien repeated, "Oh yes, plenty of work." The two were standing out in front of the Brown Pig Inn, talking about what had just occurred. "Well, we sure showed him a thing or two," Drake said. Plum replied with a curious look. "Did we? What was all that about?" Damien was acting very strange. Drake replied, smiling ruefully, "Yes, well, Plum interrupted. "What did you do? Come on, tell me." "Oh, I threatened him, slightly." Plum was even more curious now. "How were you threatening him?" Drake winked. That's for me to know, and for you to never find out." Giving Plum a serious look, he said very gravely, "I don't want you to tell anyone about what just happened. Because if people knew, that would destroy the whole point of me playing delegate. In regards to your family," he began, "I will protect you and your mother from Damien Fryer. I do not trust that man. Come on, let's go back to your home and surprise your mother that you are home so early." They walked back together away from the Brown Pig Inn, over the bridge, past the old church and back up to the farm. As they reached the farm, Adriana was surprised to see them both. With a big smile, she said, "Well, you're home early." Plum replied excitedly with even more gusto, "Yes, I am home and I have 4 days off." Adriana nearly fell back and she said with a concerned voice, "But what about our money?" "Oh, you don't need to worry. I've got it covered," said Plum, overflowing with pride, mixed with a little disbelief. He handed her the sack that Damien Fryer had given him. She took it, feeling the weight of it. Adriana's nimble fingers loosened the white tie that was cinching the worn, tan-coloured leather pouch closed. Opening it up, looks of curious confusion passed across her face. Plum looked on, and glancing at Drake, he was given a reassuring wink. At that moment, Adriana pulled away the cord and poured out the contents onto the heavily marked wooden table in the kitchen. Gasping, She fell back into a chair as the contents fell and rolled out across the table. 500 gold lorians in total fell and rang out. What? Where did you get this? She exclaimed. Plum remained silent and looked searchingly at Drake, who said, "They are wages that were long overdue, my lady." And with that, there were no more questions, for it was well known that Damien Fryer had always underpaid his staff, especially Plum. Damien Fryer held the village on a leash, holding a monopoly on the town of Devane, and without his employment it was very difficult to find work, particularly for the poorer communities. Damien Fryer was obliged to fulfil his obligation to his employees, my lady, especially now, in preparation for the upcoming census, where there will be no work throughout the kingdom on that day, exclaimed Drake. Well, breathed Adriana. Yes. Adriana's voice grew louder with resolve. Thank you, Drake. This money will be put to good use. She quickly gathered the coins, sweeping them back into the tan leather sack and tying the white cord firmly, sealing it shut. She went down the hallway towards her bedroom. Walking towards the white wall in the bedroom by the bedhead, she began pulling back one of the wooden bars on the wall, wherein a secret drawer existed. Once opened, Adriana reached for a small wooden box that was nestled inside. She took the box out and brought it to the table. She reached into a pocket on the apron she was wearing and brought out a small, plain silver key. She put the key in the lock and opened the box. Inside was all the family's savings. Loosening the tie again, she tipped the contents of the leather pouch, the 500 gold lorians, into the box. She then closed the lid, locked it, and returned the box to the safe drawer, pushing the wooden bar on the wall back into place. Remembering that there were preparations that needed to be done for the evening's meal, Adriana called out, "Come on, Plum, let's get dinner ready for ourselves and for our guest. Drake has a lot to take care of for the census the day after tomorrow." The next day was spent resting and relaxing amongst the wheat fields with Drake. Sitting down under an old archway, they started talking. "What will happen after the census?" Plum asked. "Well," Drake said, "you have a right to know what happens. If a person is found to have magical abilities, they are sent to the school of black shadows to learn how to master beings from other realms. They will also learn how to enchant their weapons to make them stronger. And once their training has finished, they can use their abilities as a business, or if they so choose, work for the government or the Shine military. As well as their magical training, they will need to work on their physical training. Strength and agility for different fighting styles and sword combat must be used, as there may be a time when they will not be able to complete an incantation. When faced with a warrior whose first instinct is to run towards them, depending on how close he is, or depending on how much time they have. It may be impossible to use a spell. That's why the school also does physical training as well as sorcery. Plum sat there wide-eyed, considering all that Drake had just told him. He thought to himself, maybe I might be the only magic user in all of Devane. But just as he came to this conclusion, Drake said, "We should be getting back. Your mother will be worried about us lingering in the wheat fields for too long."